Ethan had always used jokes to survive long workdays. Whenever the office felt too quiet or the meetings dragged on forever, he would say something silly just to keep himself awake. That afternoon, after a 3-hour meeting about spreadsheets, he leaned back in his chair and muttered to his coworkers, "I swear, I need a little desk pet to keep me company. Maybe a tiny creature who just sits there and listens to me complain." Everyone laughed, and Ethan laughed with them. It was just a joke, nothing more. But later that evening, as he stepped into his apartment, something felt different. The air seemed too still, too alert, as if someone else was inside with him. He shrugged it off, telling himself he was just tired. He heated up leftovers, sat on his couch, and tried to watch a movie. But a strange scratching sound kept interrupting the quiet dot at first. He thought it was the neighbor's cat again. It loved climbing onto balconies and meowing until someone fed it. Ethan walked toward his sliding door and opened it a crack. "Hey, buddy, I told you I don't have snacks." He froze. There was no cat on his balcony. Instead, a small girl sat calmly on top of his outdoor table. Her legs were crossed, her back straight, and her eyes locked on his in a way that made his breath catch. She looked about the size of a child, but everything else about her was different. Her silver ears twitched like soft, alert antennas. A fluffy tail curled around her, swishing slowly from side to side. And when she smiled, he caught a glimpse of tiny, sharp fangs. Ethan blinked once, twice. The girl tilted her head. "You called," she said, as if answering a question he hadn't asked out loud. He stared at her in stunned silence, trying to understand what he was seeing. Maybe he fell asleep on the couch, and this was a dream. Maybe someone was filming a prank. Maybe his neighbors hired an actress. The thoughts flew in circles inside his head, but the girl remained still, watching him with interest, her tail tapping lightly against the table. "I called?" Ethan managed to say. "You said you wanted someone for your desk," she replied calmly. "So I came." Ethan swallowed hard. This was not happening. This could not be happening. He considered closing the door, walking back inside, and pretending he saw nothing. But the girl hopped off the table in one smooth, graceful movement and walked toward him with quiet steps. "Wait, hold on," he whispered, holding up a hand. "Who are you?" "What are you?" She stopped right in front of him, barely reaching his chest in height, yet she stared up at him like she was the one studying him, not the other way around. "You may call me Sweet Fang," she said. "That is the closest translation." "Sweet? Sweet Fang?" Ethan repeated, because his brain couldn't process anything better. "Are you human?" Her tail flicked happily behind her. "Not exactly, but close enough." He rubbed his face. "I must be really tired." Sweet Fang stepped past him and walked right into his apartment as if she lived there. She sniffed the air, inspected his shoes, tapped a stack of mail with her finger, and finally climbed onto the corner of his desk beside his laptop. She curled her tail around her legs and sat perfectly still, like she had claimed her new territory. Ethan followed her slowly, still half convinced he was dreaming. "You can't just move in," he said weakly. "You summoned me," she replied. "I go where the call leads." "It wasn't a real call," Ethan tried to explain. "I was joking. Humans make jokes. It wasn't meant to be serious." She blinked at him, confused. "You spoke with intention. That is enough for my kind." "Your kind?" She nodded, but didn't say more. Instead, she reached out and poked one of his pens, watching it roll toward the edge. Before it fell, she caught it with surprising speed and placed it neatly back where it was. Then she looked at him with a proud expression, as if expecting praise. "Great," he muttered. "The mysterious fanged girl is better organized than I am." Sweet Fang's ears twitched, and she smiled, showing those tiny sharp teeth again. "You are nervous," she said softly. "But you don't have to be." Her tail swayed gently, as if trying to calm the air between them. Ethan wasn't sure if she could read his emotions, or if he was just incredibly easy to read. He sat in his chair and took a deep breath. "Okay, let's pretend for a moment that I'm not losing my mind." "Why me? Why my joke?" Sweet Fang examined the corner of his desk and ran her fingers along a sticky note as she thought. "My world listens for certain feelings," she explained. "Loneliness, frustration, a desire for company." She looked at him again, her voice soft. "You spoke from your heart, even if you are laughing." Ethan felt his ears grow warm. He wasn't used to being confronted so directly. Yes, he had been exhausted and frustrated at work. Yes, sometimes he wished he had someone who understood him. But that didn't mean he wanted. Whatever this was. Still, something about Sweet Fang felt harmless. Curious, yes. Strange, definitely. But not dangerous. Her presence filled his small apartment with a kind of warm, strange energy that pushed away the usual silence. "You came because I was lonely?" Ethan asked quietly. "No," she said. "I came because you called. But I stayed because you didn't push me away." He gave a quiet laugh. "I'm still trying to figure out how." Sweet Fang leaned forward, studying the reflection of his lamp on the desk. "Humans often say things they don't mean," she said softly. "But sometimes the heart speaks through jokes. That is why my kind listens carefully." Ethan wasn't sure if that made sense, or if she was simply giving poetic answers because she didn't want to explain more. Either way, she seemed content. Her tail curled around itself as she sat comfortably beside his keyboard, as if she had already decided this was her new home. He watched her for a long moment. She didn't fidget. She didn't seem scared or out of place. She simply existed there, calm and steady, like someone who had always belonged in that exact spot. It was strangely comforting. "So," Ethan said, scratching his head, "how long are you planning to stay?" She looked up at him, and for a moment her eyes softened in a way that felt almost human. "Until I understand why I was called," she said. "And until you understand it too." Ethan had no idea what that meant, but before he could ask another question, Sweet Fang stretched her arms and yawned. The fang tips peeked out again, but there was nothing threatening about her. She looked almost sleepy. She curled up on the edge of his desk, tail wrapped around her like a blanket. Her ears lowered slightly, and she closed her eyes. Within seconds, she was asleep, breathing softly. Ethan stared at her, speechless. This was not how his day was supposed to end. He had planned to eat dinner, maybe watch a show, and go to bed early. But now there was a fox-tailed girl sleeping on his desk because he made a joke at work. He sat back in his chair, looking at her peaceful expression. She looked small and harmless, nothing like the strange, magical being she claimed to be. For the first time that night, Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders relax. "Well," he whispered, "I guess I'm not bored anymore." Sweet Fang's tail gave one small, sleepy twitch. As if agreeing, Ethan woke up the next morning, hoping everything from last night had been a dream. For a full minute, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself that no fanged, tailed creature had walked into his apartment. But then he heard the soft tapping sound of something hitting his desk. Tap, tap, tap. He already knew what it was. When he walked into the living room, Sweet Fang was sitting exactly where he had left her, on his desk tapping, a pencil against a sticky note with deep concentration. Her tail swayed lazily behind her as she studied his laptop screen like she was solving some serious mystery. "You're awake," she said without looking at him, as if she had sensed him enter. "Your machine glows even when you sleep. I like watching it. It shows many shapes." "That's called a screensaver," Ethan said, rubbing his eyes. It's not supposed to be entertainment. Sweet Fang shrugged. It saved me from boredom. He sighed. This was his life now, apparently. He walked to the kitchen to make coffee, and Sweet Fang followed, her footsteps so light he almost didn't hear them. She climbed onto a chair and watched him with bright curiosity as he poured water and pressed buttons. "What is that smell?" she asked. "Coffee," he said. "Humans drink it so we don't fall asleep on our keyboards." She leaned close to the steaming mug and sniffed. Her nose scrunched immediately. "It smells like burnt dirt." "Thank you," Ethan said dryly. Very encouraging. Sweet Fang smiled as if she had given him a compliment. While he sipped his coffee, she walked around the apartment, touching everything with gentle curiosity. His toaster, the bookshelf, the window blinds. She would poke something, stare at it, then poke it again just to make sure it wasn't alive. "You really don't know anything about this world?" he asked. She shook her head. "I know how to listen, but I don't know your tools." "Tools," he repeated with a small laugh. "That's one way to put it." She wandered to the window and stood very still, ears raised, eyes narrowing, like she was sensing something in the distance. Ethan watched her for a moment. "You okay?" he asked. Sweet Fang relaxed and nodded, but there was something uneasy in her expression, something she didn't explain. He decided not to push. He barely understood her. He wasn't ready to dive into whatever strange instincts she had. Later that morning, Ethan had to start real work. His company allowed remote work on some days, which meant his desk was his tiny office. Unfortunately, that also meant Sweet Fang was now sitting 10 inches away from his keyboard like a furry, fanged coworker. When he began typing, she leaned closer. "You hit things and words appear," she said. "Strange magic." "It's called typing," he told her. "And it's not magic. It just looks like it." To Ethan's surprise, she watched him work with complete focus. She didn't interrupt, didn't talk, didn't even move much. Sometimes her tail brushed the edge of the keyboard, but he didn't mind it as much as he expected. Everything was fine until he joined. His first video call of the day. The moment the camera turned on, Sweet Fang leaned into the frame. Ethan nearly choked. "Hey, no, don't." His boss was mid-sentence when Sweet Fang's silver ears popped into view. Ethan quickly grabbed her by the shoulders, gently, and pulled her down below the desk. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "You were talking to a glowing square," she whispered back. "I wanted to see who was inside it." "It's not someone inside it. It's a video call." Sweet Fang peered upward. "Then why did the human stare at you like that?" He looked annoyed. "That's just his normal face." She nodded like that explained everything. When the meeting ended, Ethan sank into his chair with a groan. "Sweet Fang, you can't just pop into my work calls." She blinked. "Why? Are they dangerous?" "No," he said. "Just embarrassing." She tilted her head, thinking hard. "Embarrassing means you feel small for no reason?" "That's actually a pretty good description," he admitted. "I don't want you to feel small," she said softly. Her words caught him off guard. For someone who didn't fully understand humans, she said the right things without trying. As the day went on, Ethan noticed things about her, small things, but strange enough to make his skin tingle. For one, she reacted strongly to certain sounds. A car alarm outside made her jump like she had been struck. A door slamming made her tail go stiff and her ears flatten. But quiet noises, a kettle boiling, the ticking of a clock, didn't bother her at all. Then there was her movement. She didn't just walk, she glided. She could hop from the couch to the counter without making a sound. Once she leapt from the floor to the top shelf of his bookshelf, landing lightly like gravity, admired her too much to pull her down. And she seemed to sense how he felt. When Ethan struggled with a stressful email, Sweet Fang gently nudged his elbow. When he sighed with frustration, she wrapped her tail around his arm like a soft ribbon. It startled him the first few times. But eventually, it felt comforting. So comforting it scared him a little. Do you do that on purpose? He asked once. Do what? She said, blinking innocently. That tail thing. You know, when I'm stressed. She shrugged. You look like you need grounding. Grounding? Yes, like a tree that's losing balance. I help you stay steady. Ethan didn't know if that was instinct or something deeper, but he couldn't deny it helped. That night, Ethan cooked dinner while Sweet Fang sat on the countertop, swinging her legs and humming softly. She didn't tell him where the song came from. It was peaceful, almost dreamlike. You sing? He asked. She nodded. Songs travel. They cross worlds. They find listeners. I've never heard anything like it. That means it came from my home. Her eyes dimmed slightly as she said that, like she missed something she couldn't explain. Ethan wanted to ask more, but before he could, Sweet Fang's ears shot upward again. She turned sharply toward the window. What is it? She didn't answer. She hopped off the counter and walked slowly toward the balcony door. Her posture changed, no longer relaxed, but alert, cautious, almost defensive. Ethan followed, but stayed a few steps behind. Sweet Fang? She stopped at the glass. Her tail puffed slightly, not in fear but warning. There was someone out there, she murmured. Ethan's heart skipped. Someone? Like a neighbor? No, she said. Someone watching. He moved closer and looked outside, but the street was quiet. No one stood near his building. The wind rustled the trees, but that was all. There's no one. Sweet Fang didn't argue, but her eyes stayed focused on the shadows. He's gone now, she said softly. But he'll return. He swallowed. Who? She slowly turned toward him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Someone from my world? Ethan froze. Someone else? From wherever she came from. Why would they come here? He asked. To bring me back. Her tail curled tightly behind her, no longer playful or relaxed. For the first time, Ethan saw something close to fear in her expression. But I'm not ready to leave, she added quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure what she meant, or what this watcher wanted, or how much danger any of this brought into his life. But he knew one thing. She wasn't lying. For the rest of the night, Sweet Fang stayed close to him, closer than usual. Not in a clingy way, but as if she wanted to make sure she didn't disappear while he wasn't looking. At one point, as he worked on his laptop, she rested beside him with her tail lightly touching his arm. It wasn't playful this time. It was reassurance, maybe for him, maybe for herself. Ethan, she said softly. Yeah? Thank you for letting me stay today. He looked at her, surprised. You don't need to thank me. I do, she insisted. Because tomorrow, things may change. Her words settled into the room like a quiet warning. Ethan didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever Sweet Fang was, whatever trouble followed her, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Ethan barely slept that night. Even when he closed his eyes, his mind kept replaying Sweet Fang's words again and again. Someone from her world, someone watching, someone coming to take her back. Every sound outside made him sit up. Every shadow looked suspicious. He tried to tell himself he was overreacting, that maybe she had sensed something harmless. But deep down he knew she wasn't the type to mistake danger. By morning, he forced himself out of bed and walked to the living room. Sweet Fang was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her tail wrapped neatly around her. She wasn't watching the window anymore. Instead, she stared at her hands, like she was thinking deeply. She lifted her head as soon as she heard him. You slept lightly. I wonder why. he said, trying for a small smile. She didn't smile back. That worried him more than anything. He sat beside her. Is the Watcher coming back today? She hesitated for a moment. Yes. How do you know? My bond told me, she answered softly. Once someone calls us, we become connected. That's why I found you. That's also why one of my kind can follow my trail. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. What exactly is this bond? You keep mentioning it, but I still don't understand. Sweet Fang looked at him with calm, steady eyes. My world is full of voices. Most humans cannot hear us. But sometimes, someone speaks a feeling so clear that it reaches through the veil. A feeling? He repeated. Yes, she said. Not words, feelings. You said your joke, but your heart asked for someone to stay. Someone who wouldn't leave. Someone to sit beside you when the world felt too heavy. Ethan blinked, caught completely off guard. I didn't say all that. You didn't need to, Sweet Fang replied gently. I heard it anyway. He didn't know what to say. It was embarrassing, but also strangely comforting. He had never told anyone that he felt lonely. He had never admitted it even to himself. Yet Sweet Fang had known instantly. And the Watcher? Ethan asked. Why does he want you back? Because if I stay too long in this world, she said slowly, I become tied to it, permanently. And my people do not allow that. We are meant to guide, not belong. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Do you want to go back? Sweet Fang looked down, her tail curling slowly. I don't want to leave yet, she said in a small voice. For the first time, I feel something new. Something warm. Something human. She placed a hand over her chest. It's confusing, but I want to understand it. Ethan stared at her gently. Then stay. It's not that simple, she whispered. The day dragged on slowly. Sweet Fang stayed close to him while he worked, not playful like before, more cautious, more alert. She would glance at the window every few minutes, ears rising whenever a sound came from outside around noon, while Ethan made a quick lunch. Sweet Fang paused mid-step and turned to the balcony. He's here. Ethan froze. Now? Sweet Fang nodded silently. Ethan swallowed hard. He walked toward the window slowly, every muscle tense. When he looked outside, he saw nothing at first. But then a flicker of movement. A figure standing near the far end of the building, motionless, as if waiting. Ethan couldn't make out a face. The person wore a dark coat, head lowered. But there was something unnatural about the stillness. Something too sharp. Too focused. Sweet Fang stood behind Ethan. Her expression remained calm. But her tail had stiffened completely. He found us, she said quietly. Does he want to hurt you? Ethan asked. No, she whispered. He wants to take me home. He will say it is for my safety. But he won't ask what I want. Ethan exhaled shakily. He wasn't brave, not the type to face mysterious beings from another world. But seeing Sweet Fang standing there, small but trying to stay strong, stirred something in him. What do we do? He asked. We wait, she said. He will come to the door soon. The knock came an hour later. Slow, firm, deliberate. Ethan's stomach twisted. Sweet Fang stood in the center of the living room, straight-backed, her ears sharp and alert. When Ethan opened the door, the figure stood there. The strange man wasn't frightening in a human sense. He looked almost normal, plain clothes, quiet expression, but his eyes held an unnatural depth, as if he were looking through Ethan instead of Edu. Where is she? The man asked calmly. Ethan stepped slightly in front of Sweet Fang. She doesn't want to leave. The man tilted his head, studying Ethan like a scientist observing an insect. You misunderstand, he said. This is not her choice. Her presence here is a mistake. Sweet Fang moved beside Ethan. "It wasn't a mistake," she said. "I answered a call." The man's gaze shifted to her. Then the call was careless. "You are weakening the boundary. You know the rules." Sweet Fang didn't flinch. "I know what the rules say. And I know what I feel." "Feelings," the man repeated flatly. "You have been here too long. That is why you're confused. Come with me. Now." "No," Sweet Fang said. Her voice trembled slightly, but her stance didn't. The man sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Your bond with the human will fade once you return. Do not become attached to something temporary." Ethan stepped forward before he could think. "She's not temporary." The man's eyes slowly returned to him. "You are only human. You cannot understand what you are interfering with." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But I understand this. She chose to stay, and I won't let you force her." Sweet Fang looked at Ethan with surprise soft, warm surprise. The man's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. A quiet tension settled over the room, like invisible pressure pushing against the walls. Then Sweet Fang stepped in front of Ethan. "If he wants me," she said quietly, "he will have to go through me." The man exhaled. "Very well." And then something shifted, something Ethan couldn't explain. Sweet Fang's aura changed. Her eyes glowed faintly. Her ears rose. Her tail spread out behind her like a banner. She didn't look threatening, but she looked powerful, calm, focused, steady. The man stepped back, studying her with new caution. "You've already rooted," he said. Sweet Fang nodded. "Yes, I've started to belong." "That bond," the man murmured, "cannot be undone now." Sweet Fang looked at Ethan. "I don't want it undone." The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if confirming something. When he opened them again, the sharpness had faded. "You've made your choice," he said. "But know this: choosing a human world means losing ours." Sweet Fang didn't hesitate. "I know." The man gave a slow, almost respectful bow. "Then your path is sealed. I will not return." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway like he had never been there. Ethan closed the door, breathing hard. "Sweet Fang, are you okay?" Sweet Fang turned to him slowly. Her eyes softened, and she gave a small, relieved smile. "Yes." He sat on the couch, letting the weight of everything sink in. Sweet Fang sat beside him, her tail curling gently around his arm. "So, what happens now?" Ethan asked. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. "Now," she said softly, "I stay, and we learn what this bond means together." Ethan felt his heart settle, calm and steady, like everything finally made sense. Sweet Fang yawned, stretching her arms like a tired cat. Then she perched herself back onto his desk, her usual spot, tail switching peacefully. The world outside was still confusing and unpredictable, but inside his apartment, things felt complete. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel alone.